a case of shoulder dystocia, and we are going to discuss this guideline on shoulder dystocia, right? So, welcome first of all, everyone, and whoever is has read this guideline is going to get a lot of benefit from this discussion. So, first of all, the guideline tells you about what shoulder dystocia is, and they have made it very simple. And they have just said that it is a vaginal cephalic delivery that requires additional obstetric maneuvers. So, only when additional maneuvers are required to deliver the baby, uh, and when the genital traction has also failed, only then it is something called as shoulder dystocia, right? So the definition is very, very simple. Just remember additional obstetric maneuvers. Okay. So the next thing is they have made the objective diagnosis. And what the objective diagnosis is, when the time of delivery of the body to head is more than 60 seconds, then we have to anticipate shoulder dystocia, right? Uh, Going ahead with something that is really important for litigation is shoulder dystocia when it is related to posterior shoulder, uh, or if the baby has any problems related to the posterior shoulder, it is very less likely that it is because of the medical professional or because of the obstetrician. So, if the baby has problems with the posterior shoulder while coming out, we are very much free from the litigation, and things go in our favor in that case, because it is the anterior shoulder that gets the injury while giving excessive traction by the medical professional if it happens. So, what are the complications that can happen? You all know they are PPH for the mother, and for even third and fourth degree tears, and for the baby they are brachial plexus injury and permanent neurological dysfunction. Remember the incidence rates also. So the rate is very less. It is 0.5 to 0.7%, right? Uh, Going ahead, you have to remember the numbers, of course. The numbers are postpartum hemorrhage is 11%, perineal tears is 3.8, brachial plexus injury is 2.3 to 16%. But remember that most of the brachial plexus injury, around 90%, get resolved by their own, and only 10% of the babies have permanent neurological dysfunction. The guideline has also given one extra sentence on permanent neurological dysfunction, saying that children who are generally obese, or children who are heavyweight or large weight, are the ones who will have permanent neurological dysfunctions. So you may even anticipate which babies may have permanent problems, right? But of course, whenever the baby is delivered out of a difficult delivery, we need to hand over to the pediatrician and let pediatrician take the lead, right? Remember that neonatal BPI is the most common cause of litigation, and it is the third most litigated obstetric related complication in UK, of course, because it causes so much of trauma to the parents that they cannot handle a baby just because of the excessive traction. The baby is suffering from this brachial plexus injury, which leads to a lot of litigation. So that is why this guideline is made, and that is why this guideline is very important. Remember that 46% of the injuries. So there is an SBA that can be formed here. So substandard care is responsible for 46% of litigations. Remember that when BPI is discussed legally, it is important to determine whether the affected shoulder was anterior or posterior, because the posterior one is unlikely to be due to the action of healthcare professional. We have already discussed this thing. Okay. Now these are the factors, and these are very important. How will you anticipate shoulder dystocia? So in the pre-labor, if someone who has already had shoulder dystocia, someone has a baby who is microsomic, like more than 4.5 kg, diabetic, maternal body mass index is more than 30, apart from normal, like prolonged first or second stage of labor, or even augmentation with oxytocin, giving assisted vaginal delivery, and even the secondary arrest, all these can anticipate. We can anticipate this shoulder dystocia in all these things, and we have to be ready with the team to manage it, right? So these factors are very important for your part 2 as well as your part 3. So remember them by heart. If you can make a mnemonic out of it, it's well and good. What's happening? Okay. So how do you know how to deliver a patient and when to induce labor? So remember that if the patient is non-diabetic, then there is no reason why you should induce the patient, because we cannot predict shoulder dystocia, we cannot prevent it, right? So what happens is only in diabetics they have considered, because the shoulder dystocia rate is increased to 10 is increased by 10 folds in diabetics. We consider inducing labor or doing a cesarean section at 38 weeks in diabetic women. Okay, so that is only for diabetics and not for non-diabetics. So when a woman who is non-diabetic is there with you and she discusses the mode of delivery with you, both the options are open for her, even if she has had a previous shoulder dystocia. Of course, that point is going to come up in the next slide. Let me tell you that there are two things here in the cesarean section category. There is a cutoff of 4.5 kg for a diabetic woman to go for a cesarean section, whereas for a normal woman who doesn't have diabetes, uh, the cutoff is 5 kg. So if the woman who is non-diabetic having a 5 kg baby, you have to immediately go for cesarean section. Otherwise, it will increase the chance of shoulder dystocia and will cause a litigation. So there are clear-cut guidelines, and there is a SIP on that. We will discuss it as a part of a course coming up later on. Okay, so just remember these two SBAs are very important, related to the age, to the baby weight, and remember that for the diabetics, the time of induction is 38 weeks. Okay, now coming ahead to what we were discussing, that if the woman has previous shoulder dystocia, then even then both the options are open, because even in diabetics, though it increases by tenfold, and even if the recurrence rate is 25, it is because we cannot predict it and because we cannot say that it is going to happen 100%. There is a choice that the woman and her carers has to make. So remember that if they ask you any question related to the mode of delivery, the mode of delivery depends on the choice of the patient after deciding or after discussion of pros and cons of both with him. Okay, so it's not cesarean section. Going ahead with how will you diagnose? What are the signs? The signs are there is difficulty. First of all, the face and chin is difficult to deliver. Second thing is the head remains tightly attached to the vulva, or there may even be turtle sign, right? The next thing is there is no restitution of the fetal head, and the last is the shoulders of the baby, they don't descend, of course. Going ahead with what is the routine traction? The routine traction is traction in axial direction. It is gentle axial traction. And what is axial? Is axial traction is the traction along the fetal spine. So remember that direction, right? So that is also very important. Going ahead with what are the steps of managing a case of shoulder dystocia? There are different steps, and there is a mnemonic called as helper's mnemonic. I'll be discussing that with you. But remember that whenever you see a patient with shoulder dystocia, the first thing is not to panic, and the second thing is call for help. So when we go ahead with the algorithm there, or then we will find out what are the steps, right? But remember that because shoulder dystocia is not related to muscle problems, it is mainly related to the body problems, right? Because the anterior and posterior shoulders of the baby get stuck in the pelvis. So the episiotomy is not going to help that. So episiotomy is required only when you require room to put your hand to do internal maneuvers. Sorry. What is Macrobert's maneuver? Macrobert's maneuver is hyperflexion and hyperabduction of the hips. Okay, so the first step, what we said, is going ahead in calm manner, introducing yourself and taking up the lead. Uh, Asking the patient to stop pushing or stop giving any further pressure if someone is giving. And sorry for that. And then going ahead, asking the patient to come on the edge of the table, and then going ahead with microburst maneuver, asking the patient to hyperflex and hyperabduct. At the same time, you may give suprapubic pressure. This increases the AP diameter, the microburst maneuver, and also reduces the lumbosacral angle. So it straightens the lumbosacral angle and gives more room for the baby, right? For the baby to, baby can may actually rotate in the oblique diameter and becomes easy for the baby to deliver. Suprapubic pressure we have to give like just like we give our CPR, and it is to be given on the back side of the baby. Try to push the baby's arm or shoulder into the oblique diameter. So that is suprapubic pressure. Okay, so you have to remember these two are the first important things, and remember that the success rate of these two is around 90%. So if you are well aware that it is shoulder dystocia and you know what to do, you will be able to save the baby in around 90% of the time. So this is what is there in the guideline. Now going ahead to the next step, if this doesn't help, is the internal maneuvers. Now herein, why is where you require an episiotomy, because you want to put your hand inside, don't want to have any tears because of that. So once you put your hand after giving an appropriate episiotomy, you need to push the baby's shoulders from the back, either the anterior or the posterior, whichever you're comfortable with, depending on the baby's position, and try to push the baby's shoulder into the oblique diameter. Or you may just try to deliver the baby's posterior arm by sweeping the arm against the baby's chest. This will reduce the engaging diameter and will help the baby to deliver. But if these things don't help, the next important thing is not going for all four maneuvers. The next important thing is to inform the consultant. So herein, the EMQs get wrong, and that's why we feel that we know the guideline. Why did we not get it right? So the next important step is to inform the obstetrician, a consultant, and anesthetist, right? And then go ahead with all fours maneuver. Those who are thin patients can actually go with all four maneuvers very easily, but those patients who are little obese, it's difficult for them. We can keep on repeating the same steps until the consultant comes. The last step or the third line of management is destructive management that we actually do, like plesiotomy or symphysiotomy sometimes. This may even help the baby to at least get delivered. Sometimes, with a very small success rate, Zavanelli's method may also be done, wherein the baby's head is pushed inside again, and the baby is delivered by cesarean section. So this is also one of the third line treatment. But remember that in any case, which is an emergency, the all four position and the rollover method has got a success rate of 83%. In all the emergencies, NHS people, they have to document things, because there, if there's any investigation, they are to be seen by risk management team, and they should be knowing what all happened at what time. So the documentation is very important part. Remember that whenever there is an emergency or any mishap that happens, we have to do all these things. So there is an incident reporting by DATIX, debriefing, there's documentation. Debriefing is of the patient, the relatives, as well as the team, right? Then there is documentation. Duty of candor is taking the responsibility of whatever has happened and explaining everything to the patient, right or wrong. Okay. Then the drills, that giving more skills and drills to the residents, so that they can, if they face any situation, they are able to handle it at least until the consultant comes. Then discussing it in the meeting, doing reflective practice, finding out what could be done better, making out more awareness by giving the handouts and giving more charts, and then doing a making a policy out of that is what is all important, right? So this is how they deal with emergencies, and this is how they actually whenever they come across some patients of emergency, they try to develop their in such a way that uh, things become easy and there is less of litigation and more lives could be saved. Now, this is the mnemonic that I was talking about, and you may just remember it in this way. It becomes very easy when you are solving the questions. Okay, so that's the session for your shoulder dystocia. Thank you, guys.